And welcome to another edition of Political Power Ranker. Thanks very much for joining us again. Chris Berg, Director of Political Programming for affiliates, Nexstar affiliates across the country. And my partner in crime when we talk about polling, Spencer Kimball, Emerson College Polling Director, located right there in Boston, Beantown, basically where the heart of the country started. Spencer, good to see you.
Yeah, it's Patriots country up here these days, but we'll talk about that after the Super Bowl.
You know what? I'm siding with the Patriots this time around. I hope they win number 8, maybe, right? They
I
get
think it's
7 and going to 8.
7, but it would be an upset. It would be an upset,
It would
but
be
we'll
an
see.
upset. All right, maybe you can put a poll on that to see what everyone thinks right before. And we'll put some money on whatever side you
No,
decide is going
that's
to
why they
win.
play the games.
Oh, there you go. All right, let's get to the real stuff. It's that time of year. It's January, and no place to go but Michigan in January. So, Spence, what do you have?
Yeah, so we took a look at the state of Michigan and we did 1,000 people, our likely voters. But remember here, we have a subset, particularly of Democratic likely voters. We have 491 with a margin of error of about 4.4. And we're going to dig into that Democratic primary here for U.S. Senate today.
All right, U.S. Senate primary, a big race, open seat. So, what did you find, Spencer?
Well, as we always like to land the plane, in that primary, we have Mallory McMorrow. She's at 22%, Haley Stevens at 17, and Abdul Al-Said at 16%. You can see second and third place very close. As we dig into those numbers, we can see that amongst Democrats and independents, they're breaking for McMorrow by they've got about 20, 25%. McMorrow's doing better with older voters, and Al-Said is doing better with younger voters. Haley is kind of balanced throughout the demographics. We'll see if she can create a core base. But right now, it looks like McMorrow, particularly on the issue of threats to democracy, seems to be a key driver in what's putting her ahead.
You know, we want to go to Michigan and Rick Albin because Rick's on the ground there. He's a political reporter. Everything from politics in the western side of Michigan at Wood TV in Grand Rapids goes through Rick Albin. So, Rick, great to have you here. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. I think this is a great conversation. Can't wait to talk about it because this poll broke some new ground.
Well, tell us about what you're seeing and about that new ground. What are candidates talking about this poll?
Well, I think the first thing that we look at, and I'm going to generalize here, but as we look at the bulk of the polling up to now, Congresswoman Stevens has had a marginal lead in most polls, and the rest of the numbers kind of trailed, not unlike what you're seeing. This is the first time that I've seen a poll, at least a poll like this, a comprehensive poll that shows State Senator McMorrow, a two-term state senator from Oakland County, at 22%. So she's got a 5-point lead over Haley Stevens in this poll, and that's new. So earlier today, just after these numbers were released here in Michigan, her camp put out a release that said McMorrow surges ahead. Now, this is one poll, but this is how campaigns are run, and this is something that they're going to be talking about for several days. In fact, I'll be talking with her on Saturday, and more about that poll and kind of what it means and what she thinks it signals for her campaign, because this has been and will, I believe, remain a tight race right on through the primary in August.
We are recording this on Thursday, the 29th, for those of you who are watching. So, what do you think, not about the analysis of the polls, but does anything surprise you in these numbers? Are you seeing this surge by McMorrow on the ground, or is this just kind of one of those snapshots that are a little bit different?
I think it is a snapshot, but I think it's a snapshot that is well in focus, because I don't think that this race has gelled. You wouldn't expect it to. We're still a long time away from the filing deadline in April. So there's a lot that's going to happen. We've seen in other races, major candidates drop out and all of those things. So not that I expect that in this race, but so we've got a long way to go. And I think this is just one of those moves. So as people are out there working, and this is very much retail politics, right? You're out talking to the base. You want to talk to the broader audience, but before you can talk to them in a more comprehensive way, you've got to get the Democrats who are going to turn out in August to want to vote for you. And I think we've seen a lot of activity. We've seen a lot from Stevens in West Michigan. We've seen a fair amount from McMorrow. I will say that El Sayed has a big operation, a well-oiled operation in West Michigan, although we don't see him as much. He's focusing a lot in the eastern part of the state, which makes sense. It's where he's from, and that's where a big concentration of Democratic voters are. So each of them is using a different strategy. One of the things that's a rite of passage if you're going to run for office in Michigan is you've got to go to the UP. As far as I know, at least McMorrow and El Sayed have, I'm sorry, McMorrow and Stevens have. I don't know if El Sayed has, but I'm pretty sure he will. You got to go to the UP, and you got to go in the winter because you don't get any points if you go up there in the summertime.
And for those of you who don't know what the UP is, think about Michigan's the glove, UP's up here. So you got to cross the Mackinac Island Bridge. There you go. There's a good shot of the UP. And get over to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that's cold country up there. Michigan's cold, but it's cold country up there. It's an adventure. Dog sleds are not needed, but if you got one, it's not a bad thing to take along with you.
No, that's right.
This time of year.
Yeah, but it's also important because I think that politicians here, I think, understand, and I suspect, and Chris, because you work in states all across the country, and I know Spencer, you do polling all across the country. There are certain things that people expect, and in Michigan, those voters in those smaller counties that are not going to turn the race by themselves, they expect to see the candidates. They expect you to come out and do that kind of campaigning. And they don't care if it's snowing or raining or whatever it is. They want to talk to you. They put a lot of value, and we've seen this over the years. Senator Debbie Stabenow was probably one of the best we've ever seen. Look, we've only had one Republican senator elected since 1994, and that was Spencer Abraham. And he was probably on a glide path, even though 2000 was a tough presidential year, as we all remember. But he was probably on a glide path to be reelected because incumbents get reelected. And Debbie Stabenow went to every county and did just that kind of retail politics, and that made the difference. So I do think that that what these candidates are doing right now is important. It's not always something that is on my radar, not something I'm necessarily going to cover, but it's going to be on the radar of the people who are going to be casting those votes in August. And I think all three of these campaigns seem to be doing a pretty credible job.
Before we move on to the next slide, I do want to ask you one last question. If you can just give us and the viewers out there 30 to 45 seconds on each of these three candidates, because they're new names for a U.S. Senate run. Maybe a little bit more, Haley Stevens, Congresswoman, a little bit more well-known, but the others are not.
Yeah, so if you talk about Haley Stevens over from the east part of the state in Oakland County in Birmingham, she has been in Congress and has made some inroads. She has done some kind of big things. She was very vocal during the last governmental shutdown and talking about healthcare. And that's what that shutdown was about. And so she has really been out front. Of course, some of this is taking advantage of her current status as a candidate, but I do think that she has created somewhat of a name for herself, not like some members of Congress, but she is a known entity. Mallory McMorrow is a state senator. She is wrapping up her second term. She too, in the state Senate, has been the champion of a number of ideas that would lean towards the liberal side, very appealing to many Democrats in the state of Michigan. And I think that her name recognition, and as we'll see in some of these slides later, when you consider what people think of them or if they think anything about them, I think that's one impediment for her. And then for El Sayed, he ran for governor 4 years ago, and it was kind of I'm sorry, that was, maybe he ran, that primary was 8 years ago, my apologies. But that was kind of a Herculean effort running against the former Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer. So each of them have been out there in their own right. They are probably better known in Southeast Michigan, maybe even Central Michigan than they are in West Michigan, or all of that area that runs above M57, which is, think about the northern half all the way up to the UP. But where are the votes? For Democratic primary, they're in Southeast Michigan. That's where you really got to concentrate. Then they're in Central Michigan, and increasingly they're in parts of Kent County, a good portion of the city of Grand Rapids, and in Kalamazoo. So I think what these candidates are doing, and my observation, is that they're working smart. They're not doing a lot of big outreach, but they're doing the retail politics they need to do where they need to do it.
Excellent stuff. I appreciate that insight, Rick. It's going to make the rest of these numbers make so much more sense. So, Spence, let's go back to you. You got another set of numbers, the demographics and how they're breaking down.
Well, here we're taking a look at the candidates and where their votes are coming from. And if you look at McMorrow, she's getting the plus, those over 60. She's 37% of that vote, and that's what's driving her lead right now. And the issue there is the threats to democracy. And if we recall, she's back in the Democratic Convention, she had the Project 2025 book. So she is seen, I think, within the party as a leader. It'd be interesting to see Rick's opinion on where she sits in that lane. El Sayed is strong with younger voters, and he's got Bernie Sanders endorsement that might carry a lot of weight as people start tuning into the race. And you can see Stevens is kind of equal across the board, but it really shows that all three candidates are viable here and that there's more undecideds than a plurality. So it shows that the race is wide open between these three, and we'll see which lanes they end up going in to get to victory.
Rick, what are your thoughts there? And Spence's question.
No, I think that's, of course, an excellent analysis, and he knows because he knows the numbers. But I think one of the other things when you look at this, if you're looking at doing well in particular age groups, then you have to also consider if you've got this 40%, for example, in undecided for some of these candidates. And when you look at some of these other age categories, then what is the propensity of those age categories to vote? So if you're doing very well with younger voters, can you convert that into people going out and voting in a primary? Because while we have seen increased participation here in Michigan and Spencer, I think perhaps around the country, we've seen that kind of marginally blip up. It still doesn't equate, I don't think, to voter turnout. Whereas when you look at McMorrow, when she's doing well with this 60 plus, they're going to vote one way or the other. Those are real votes and they're going to show up. So I think when you look at those numbers, you have to consider, yes, you're doing well. Can you convert that to a vote in August? And that would be my concern.
Go ahead, Spence.
I would just say in the state of Michigan, though, it's very unique. Bernie Sanders country, 2016, had that very big upset out there where the polls really underestimated his support on that turnout of the younger vote. And we'll see if El Sayed is able to get out that youth vote that has generally sat on the sideline and sat on the sideline in 24. So you're asking to change opinions and behavior, but that's what we'll be watching, and we'll see if he can compete with them.
And remember, we have no reason absentee, early voting, mail-in, all of the things you can do. So voting is no longer standing in line at a poll, and I think that works in the favor of that argument.
And Rick, one last question on this slide. Is it a surprise to you that more of an establishment candidate like Haley Stevens is not winning the 60-plus vote?
Yeah, I was very surprised by those numbers, and I think that part of the reason may be that, again, where are you campaigning? Who are you talking to? So if you're spending a lot of your campaign time and effort doing those kind of things, reaching out to those voters, or are you spending a lot of your time reaching out to donors? Where are you spending your resource? And I don't mean the cash resource, the one resource that you cannot expand, and that's your time. And so when you get to the fundraising and take a look there, as a sitting congresswoman, you would expect her to be ahead, and she is, and maybe she's spending more time there than with that outreach to that core voter. But yes, that's a surprise.
And just a quick recap of the numbers. Last numbers we saw, she raised the most, more than $4 million, and also spent a lot too. All of them sitting with, well, she had about 2.6 left on hand now, 1.8 for El Sayed, and about 1.5 for McMorrow, or the last numbers I saw. Is that reflective of what you see too?
Yeah, I'm just double checking those numbers. Those are identical to what I had. And one of the things you like to watch is what is the burn, right? So if you raise 3.8, you got 1.5 on hand, which are the numbers roughly that McMorrow has. That means you're spending quite a bit of money here early on, and that too can have an impact on the numbers we're seeing right now. spending the money in the right places, even though we're not seeing, advertising buys and that type of thing, at least nothing that we have seen. But, sometimes you're spending money to raise money. So how much of that money has she spent to continue fundraising? Because fundraising isn't free. And so it really would be instructive when we get this the next financials to see where they're spending some of that money and to see how much money is coming in. So are you getting the bang for your buck? Are you spending it someplace that generates more dollars, or are you spending it someplace that gets you more numbers in polling, for example, that would then help you get more dollars?
Money matters, and if you had to pick one of these three, who's the better fundraiser? You don't want to immediately go to Stevens because she's an establishment person that she's already has an infrastructure. El Said jumps out just because he's raised more than $3.5 million as someone who's got a way to raise money, has found a way. But how would you rank them, 1, 2, and 3? And then we got to take a break.
I think you have to look at El Said because you've got, he does have that Bernie factor. And so that gives him a pipeline to those donors. That's a real big plus because those are donors who aren't likely to give to these other two anyway. But for somebody who has never been elected to a broader office, somebody who has run statewide, but again, didn't have a great deal of traction in a likely unwinnable race. So here's a candidate who, when people talk about Stevens and they talk about McMorrow, but they have to talk about El Said because he's right there with him, not only monetarily, but numerically when you look at this poll. So I think he is, at this point, I think he's overperforming, and that could be a real big problem for the other two if he, as Spencer pointed out, catches fire kind of like Bernie Sanders did here during that presidential primary that had a whole lot of Democrats in the establishment saying, what happened?
We got a legit three-way race in the Senate Democratic Party and race for Senate over there in Michigan. So, and we also have some numbers that Spencer has about if each of these were matched up against the likely nominee, Mike Rogers. That is coming up right when we come back from this quick break. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker, where we're talking all things Michigan Senate Democratic race for that seat up there and who's going to take that nomination into the general election. Spencer Kimball from Emerson College Polling joining myself, and Rick Albin, Wood TV political reporter extraordinaire, also joining us. Rick was giving us a tutorial on Michigan politics in the first half. I hope you caught that. If you didn't, go back and watch it. But now we're moving forward, and this is really interesting. There's some space you're finding, Spencer, between whoever's the nominee for the Democratic Party and the likely nominee for the Republican Party and Mike Rogers.
Yeah, that's what we took a look at the general election here amongst the 1,000 participants. And you can see that the Democrats, Haley and McMorrow, run very well, or at least better, against Rogers than El Said does. El Said, it's a toss-up. And what we see the difference is independents. Independents are breaking for the two female Democrats by about 12 and 13 points. In the matchup with El Said and Rogers, it's a 3-point advantage for El Said. So he's got some room to make up with independent voters, but you could see maybe he's diving deeper into the Democratic base right now to try to win that primary. And we'll see how this all plays out. But there does seem to be a differing starting point depending on who gets that nomination.
And Rick, as I mentioned, the polling seems a little bit more spread out a little bit further. Rogers is falling a little bit farther behind the polls we've seen in the fall leading into the holiday season. Are the topical events that are happening across the country right now a drag on Rogers with him being aligned with Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that, Chris, with the question, but I would ask Spencer. I mean, aren't we seeing nationwide that there may be a drag on Republicans because of some of the events that we're seeing happening? I mean, it feels like that to me. I don't have anything that I can hold up and say, here are the numbers, but it does feel like that to me. And I guess if it's all right, I would ask the other question is, how important are independents going to be? Because, I mean, that could really, if they play a bigger role than normal, that could be a big tide turner, if you
And
Spence?
that's what we're seeing with the independents. They've been shifting away from the Republicans over to the Democrats. We've seen it in all of the special elections in 2025. So there is a track record now to look at since 2024 election. And if those trends continue, then Michigan was, a toss-up state. Rogers almost had the upset of the night in Michigan in that Senate race. But now it turns out that if things have shifted 5-6 points to the left, it's going to make it more difficult for these tight races to go to the, especially in this open seat, to go to the Republican. And Trump's coattails is not where Whitmer's is. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Trump is underwater in approval, while the governor is above water. So if you're going to jump on one of the sides, you think that the Dems start with an advantage here in Michigan.
We're going to keep moving because time is running short. We've now got a slide, unfavorable. Spencer, let's talk about that.
Well, these are statewide numbers, and you can see that, again, there's still a lot of voters out there who are unsure, particularly amongst the Democratic candidates. But when we dug into those Democratic numbers, the Democratic voters like their three candidates. They're all sitting around 35 to 40% favorable, around 7 or 8% unfavorable. But Bernie Sanders, if you see statewide, he's about split. But amongst Democratic primary voters, his favorability is at 79% and his unfavorables are at 8%. So it'll be interesting to see if Bernie gets on the campaign trail up there and what type of momentum he can create. Now, remember, El Sayed does not perform as well in the general as the other two candidates. So there's a little bit of a rub there with the Democrats and on the electability front. But we'll see if the enthusiasm can put him over the top. As I said, it is still an open race amongst those three candidates.
Rick, I'm going to get you in a second, but someone would ask me, why would you put Bernie Sanders in there? You alluded to it, but why would you put Bernie Sanders in that Michigan, fave-unfave poll?
Well, he has come out and endorsed El Sayed, so he's a character. He's in the the show, and we've seen him perform very well in Michigan in those primaries back in 16 and in 20. So why not include him in here? We're measuring Trump, but we're measuring Whitmer.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Is that his performance in 16 and 20 overperforming and then the endorsement is your rationale for that.
Yeah, and he seems to have some grassroots support that might be overlooked in other polling.
Rick, thoughts on that?
The last time that Bernie Sanders was in Grand Rapids, and remember that the demographics have changed here. It's not the Republican stronghold it once was. But the last time he was here, and I think it was in the 20 cycle, no matter, there's a place here called the Calder Plaza. And it's a big gathering place, and they close off the streets and thousands of people can show up. And they told me of their plans to be down there. And I was like, well, I wonder who will show up. And the answer was everybody. It was a big crowd that you didn't expect in West Michigan. So when you talk about Bernie Sanders having pull and having grassroots appeal, you're spot on. Now, what does that translate to? That's the unknown. That's why we'll be here on primary night trying to figure it out. But I think that an endorsement from Bernie Sanders in this election cycle, when you look at what happened in New York and other places and the candidates that are winning, I think Bernie Sanders endorsement probably means more now than it has in the past.
Which is an amazing thing. And, wow. All right. One last slide before we go who's up, who's down. We're going to go to issues. Spence, this is something we're seeing similar numbers across the country, but let's talk about it for a moment.
Well, the economy is, I think, doing better in Michigan because it's not as big of an issue. It's dropped about 8 points. But if you look at housing affordability, that's bumped up. And the issue of housing affordability is really hitting younger voters, especially those 30 to 39-year-olds. We can see healthcare is percolating as a top issue. It kind of was off the table in the last election cycle, but that's what we see coming up. And then obviously threats to democracy. That's where McMorrow is really winning. Those voters, 40% are voting for her in the primary. So she is that candidate, but we're going to see about the economy. That's the big, elephant in the room. On the Democratic side, it's not as important. It's like 29%. Threats are like 28%, but it's still a big issue, and we'll see which candidate can solve those problems for the voters.
All right, there's that. Now we have to go to up and down, and because we only have about 2 minutes left. So Spence, who's up this week in your poll?
Well, as we took a look at that Democratic primary, Mallory McMorrow winning the older vote. Those over 60 are going to make up about 40% of the turnout, and she's winning that group. So if she can maintain that, we have her up. But remember, it's still about 7 months to the primary.
Exactly. August primary. Rick, any thoughts on who's up on Spencer's poll?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the number that jumped out at me, the very first thing that I saw. The other interesting thing when you talk about the issues, I think healthcare, even though it is up, I think it may be up more as we go along because there's still a big lingering question about how that's going to play out.
Got it. And Spencer, who's down? Or what's down?
The temperature. We're sitting here in single digits. We're all praying for Puxatawny Phil next week to find that winter is going to be over, but we'll see if Phil can deliver.
I'm with you. I was in Austin, Texas I did a Jasmine Crockett, James Tallarico debate on Saturday. I got stuck for 3 days down in Austin. The weather is thumbs down for me. How about you, Rick?
I live in Michigan. This is just what it is.
Understood. But your summers are the best summers anywhere. So that's awesome.
That's right.
All right. Rick, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Spencer, as always, we're attached at the hip, so your numbers are great. If you are looking for us, you can follow us, a Political Power Ranker, on Facebook, IG, and all those other X's and everything else out there on social media. We'd love to have you. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next week. More polling coming. See you then.